The demands were made for the state of Iowa, City Council, and the Des Moines Police Department. I went as far back as May of last year on the Des Moines Black Liberation Movement social media pages to find this list of demands, numerous demands. What I learned, some of those have been met, while others, considered by some, ridiculous.
Demand after demand from the Des Moines Black Liberation Movement. They demand chokeholds be banned and the firing of biased police. Sergeant Paul Parisic says a lot of those demands were a part of the police department's policy already. Chokeholds have been banned since the 90s, and they have an anti-bias policing policy since 2018. The number one demand at one point was identify and fire all Des Moines police officers with violent records.
We got all the mechanisms in place to either address bias or root it out. That's not something somebody needs to demand us to do. It's something that we've been doing for quite some time.
Only Chief Winger can fire officers, but at one time, he was on the list of demands to lose his job. So I asked who would have the authority to fire him.
That would be a decision that's left up to the city council and the city manager.
For a span of nearly 2 weeks, I sent emails to city officials requesting an interview. No one wanted to talk. I also tried contacting members of Des Moines BLM. Members eventually declined an interview as well. And outside the police department, Ed Bloomer stands at the corner of Court and East 1st Street 5 days a week protesting.
The cop that put his knee on the throat of George Floyd, I didn't know what in the world to think. That was just, well, it was murder.
A year later, Ed is fighting for justice, and he wants all members of BLM to know
that we support them, that they're our allies, they're our friends, they're our neighbors.
Ed also thinks Des Moines PD is doing a great job, but when you take a look at the demands, two that have stayed consistent throughout the country: defund and abolish police departments.
Those are probably two of the most ridiculous.
We looked into the city's budget, specifically for the police department. The numbers for the past 4 fiscal years were available. For the 2016-2017 fiscal year, the budget was over $61 million. The 2019-2020 fiscal year budget was over $70 million. That's an increase of around $9 million. Sergeant Parisic says there would be negative impacts on the community if they were defunded or abolished.
In 2020, we responded to over 195,000 calls for service. Who's going to do that if the police aren't there?
And that's a huge question, something I was really hoping to talk to the Des Moines City Council and members of the Des Moines BLM. As for the Des Moines Police Department, Sergeant Parisic says of the demands, they can get behind the rooting out of biased officers and holding each other accountable. He says they're doing that by policies they say they already have in place. I'm Lakyn McGee for Local 5 News. We are Iowa.